We need to teach the students not only being critical to sources, which we're pretty good at nowadays, but we also need to be critical against our own ways of thinking. Well, so Gapminder Foundation, we work for a fact-based worldview that everyone can understand. And that sounds like a pretty bold statement, but I think it's very important. And the fact-based worldviews is something new. We could not have it before, because it's a new thing that we actually have the data, which is fantastic. But going the whole step to everyone can understand, it's a pretty hard thing. So that is what we try to do all the time. And we are, this is Ola, waving, me here, and Hans, who unfortunately passed away a year ago. And together, we started the Gapminder Foundation in 2005, and since then, we have tried to bring life to data like this, because we have learned that people are not very interested in going through numbers in this way. That is the old-fashioned way, and people get a bit bored, most of them. And the ones who doesn't, we are worried in other ways. So we have tried to do different kinds of visualizations tools. We've done this computer software, we improved the search feature and so on. But what we realized, just making the data searchable and playable and visualized doesn't really do it all, because we need to explain the world as well, because people are lacking a consistent worldview. So we started doing more like documentaries and TED Talks and stuff. But then we realized, probably if we want to make a big change, we need to reach out to schools and to kids, because they will be the decision makers later on. And we started looking more into the life at school, and we started realizing we need to make free resources that they can use in the classroom. So that is basically where we started. And we were a bit frustrated that people didn't have a fact-based worldview, and we didn't really get why, because we were doing all these different things, the softwares, the lecturing, the documentaries, and so on. But then we realized that we forgot to actually write down anywhere what we thought people should know. So that's when we wrote the book Factfulness. So we started actually basically collecting the things we had been working on for about 18 years before. We started actually putting it into print. And we made sure that we actually use our visualizations within the book too. So opening the book, we will see our classical chart of the world, of the countries of the world on different income and health levels. And the back, we have these, because we want this book to be a handbook. And we want it to be useful for a lot of people. So instead of putting it as a book organized around the different important topics of the world, like education, health, and so on, which we usually do, we put it around 10 different themes that we call the dramatic instincts. So the book is consisted of 10 chapters of dramatic instincts, which are basically homemade by us, that we think fit to explain the world, and while people are getting it actually a bit wrong. And we actually, at the end of each chapter, we do have bullet lists. So we are hoping that when people have read the book, they can go back to it and read the bullet points and actually use it as a resource moving forward. And a few days back, I got the best email ever, because when we wrote the book, our goal was actually, we were foreseeing a teacher, a middle school or high school teacher, on their summer vacation, actually laying down in the hängmatta, what's the name in English? You know, hammock, sorry, in the hammock, and reading our book. And it should be something that would be easy and fast. So therefore, we actually took out almost every single academic word we could find. And that has been my task, because Hans, he was very frustrated that people didn't know things. So he basically shaped our worldview in that sense and told us what needs to be done. Ola has been working a lot with the data, sitting here, and he is basically the one actually throwing out ideas all the time. And I have been the boring one, actually cutting down and reducing and removing, saying that most people are not that interested in all these fantastic things. Because both Ola and Hans were very, full of ideas. So I basically spent my life cutting down and removing. So in the beginning, our book was this long, and then I took it down to this. And we put all these images and made it something easy to consume. But the email now, I forgot to mention that. A few days back, I got the email from a teacher in Biskopsgården in Gothenburg, and she was saying that she has such a hard time getting her middle school students, högstadiet, to actually read. And they are supposed to read fiction books. And they don't feel that that is necessary because they don't see the need why to do that, because they want to do something meaningful. And they don't have a school library because it's cut downs. So she didn't know what to do. And then one day she realized maybe she could hand over the factfulness book, her own copy, to Amid in her class. So she gave it to him. And what happened was he was one of the guys never reading. And he started reading. And then he stopped going out for the breaks because it's just reading constantly. So that, I think, is the optimal success, that we made something so easy to read, so Amid, who refused to read, actually started reading and enjoying it. So that was the best thing ever. So, yes, isn't it wonderful? I mean, when we were looking for writing something that middle school teachers could enjoy, I didn't really think that it would go all the way down to the middle school students. So I'm really happy about that. So in the book, we start by asking 13 fact questions to the general public. And we asked the same to you. It was actually just a fraction of you answering, and you were pretty good, I have to say. So you were not very representative, but I'm going to show you a few examples. So the first question, global climate experts believe that over the next 100 years, the average temperature will get warmer, stay the same, or get colder. Get warmer is the correct answer. We asked this in 14 countries in representative samples, and this is how it spread. And we can see here Sweden, 82% got this right, which is actually pretty fascinating. So many people actually understand this. This is a communication success. We don't have to talk so much about climate, we can actually start doing things. And what about you in the room here? Of course, I would actually imagine that you would be very good. I'm a bit disappointed because the talking point here is usually, you know, on this question, people are actually getting almost this good. But moving forward, how many of the world's one-year-old children today have been vaccinated against some disease? 20, 50, or 80%? 80% is the correct one. This is how the general public were answering. Oh, let's go back. So 20% in Swedish audience actually got this right. Yes. And when we see this result, it's not as good anymore. Because if they were just guessing randomly of 3 bananas, A, B, and C, they would actually get 33% right by just, you know, not reading the question, just picking one. Unfortunately, that is not how these results are forming, because when people are guessing, they are using their preconceived ideas about the world, which takes them wrong, because people tend to think that the world is worse than it actually is in many cases. So what about you in this room? Now comes the big disappointment. I mean, you could applaud yourself, but it's not very representative, I can tell you. So this is fantastic, isn't it? So we have probably the most enlightened audience ever. We've been to other audiences, not as impressive. World Health Summit, Davos, and Nobel laureates and medicine scientists. And one of the 5 largest banks, we are not allowed to disclose which one, and they were smart enough having us sign that before Hans actually asked them this question, because this is not as fascinating. Just imagine, they are the ones sitting on the money investing for the future, just saying that it might be a good idea if we came up to the chimpanzee level. And then we have this one. In the last 20 years, the proportion of people living in extreme poverty worldwide has halved, stayed the same, or doubled. Halved is the correct answer. And here are the results, not as impressive. Sweden, 25% got it right, on top with Norway. We asked the public who were answering this question, how did you know this? And they said Hans Rosling, which means we've had some effect, but we still have a bit to go. In this room, it's actually the best result we've ever seen. Or am I right? 97%. I've never seen anything like this. It's amazing. So, yes. So basically, we can go home, because you already know everything. So this is how the general public were answering. 0 correct answers. Actually, 15% got that. And I mean, that in itself is pretty impressive, getting 0 correct answers when you have 12 questions to choose from. So, and this is how it were formed. And remember, if they wouldn't have read any of the questions, just picking randomly, they should have ended up on the chimpanzee there. but unfortunately they didn't. And this is where one Swede actually got 11 correct, and nobody got 12. I don't even show yours, because you were so damn good. So congratulations on that. But this is actually what we have to work against. We have a general public out there who actually think the world is very different from how it is actually. So looking out the window, it's very hard to see what's happening in the world around us. So when we instead turn to the news, we will see disasters, wars, refugees, diseases, paradises, cute animals, and exotic cultures. And then we form a worldview. But that doesn't really work, because the news and the media shows us everything that is extraordinary, because that is what we like to consume. But our brains have a hard time handling that we're just being exposed to exceptions. So we do need facts and frameworks to actually get the world correct. So imagine the world as a street. I will make that. Where you have the poorest to the left and the richest to the right, and everybody else somewhere in between. What we've done is actually, on this street, we have actually visited homes all over the world. So I'm just going to show you briefly. If I manage to get my mouse correct here, yes, I do. So here we have the tool. It's called the Dollar Street. So what we can do here is that we see all the houses, we see the poor families to the left, the rich to the right. We've sent out photographers to almost 300 homes in the world and look in 50 countries. And Fernanda here in the middle, she's the one actually coordinating it. So if you want to participate and add your home, which we would love, talk to Fernanda. So what we do then is that we add these families on this street, and we can actually go and see immediately. Remember, people don't like statistics, so we have to work around that a bit. So instead of talking of an income axis, we call it the street, right? So let's put here, if we put beds, for instance, we can just click beds, and we can immediately see what these different households, if we have internet connection, that means, which I don't have, it seems. Yes, now we had. So then we can immediately see what beds look like at different incomes. And if we just zoom in like this, we can, for instance, look at a certain income bracket if we're interested, and just see how the beds are spreading. Or we can go down, etc. So we can explore the world. And if we get interested in a certain home, like this one in Malawi, we can click in here and we can visit the home. And that way we can actually work with the imagery and sort of start getting a worldview just out of exploring the images like this. And we can look at toilets, and we can do a lot of different things, which is my favorites. I think we have to do that, even if the clock is ticking. So these are toilets and different incomes all over the world. And remember, when we are up here in this corner, this is the kind of toilets we see around us. White, water, flushing ones. It's hard to remember the whole spectrum, that the world toilets actually look more like this. This is a more representative image of the world. So we try to make these different frameworks to make it easier to understand the world. But not everything works as photos. Sometimes we need videos. Now I was supposed to have some sound. No sound cable is in, that's why. Imagine that you hear people brushing their teeth here. You can just fill in the blanks. We see here how people are brushing their teeth with plastic toothbrushes, very serious are some of them, and then coming down here, all the time, in all different places, plastic toothbrushes, because they are cheap and durable. And when we come down to the poorer end, people cannot afford the plastic toothbrushes, so they start brushing with fingers or their sticks or something. So here, in the Dollar Street project, we tag this image not only as her wall, but also as her toothpaste, because that is how we need to understand the world to get it correctly. In the poorer end, we reuse items for so many different things. So now I'm going to do a wild thing. I'm going to do like this. I never show organizers how many slides I have, because then they get nervous. So to understand the world, we can think of it as having 4 income levels. So imagine the 7 billion people of the world, same street, This is how the people are spreading. We need these kind of frameworks, otherwise we have a hard time understanding the world. And to really understand what it means, we can say that on level 1, you actually have to walk if you're going somewhere. Level 2, you can bike. Level 3, you probably have access to a motorbike. And level 4, you have some kind of access to a car. And talking about food, we could say the same. We can see a gradual change. And level 4, where we are at, is the level where if you feed your kids with the same food 2 days in a row, you're a bit afraid that they're going to be malnourished, right? So that is the standpoint, our starting point. So to understand the world, we also need not only to know where people are on the income level or what everyday life looks like, we also need to know where in the world they live. So here are the same 7 billion people, 1 in America, 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. To remember this, it's not that hard, because we can use a PIN code for it, 1114, pretty easy, that you can remember. Of course, the population will change into the future. According to the UN, this is what is most likely going to happen until 2050, and until 2100, it will be something like this. More people in Africa, more people in Asia, no more people here. So dividing the world into the classical West, we just have to remember that we will be a small fraction of the world population in the future. This is where things will happen. So we also need to understand something about how the population will grow according to the age groups. So this is the world today. We have the age groups here. What's going to happen into the future is that the old people will die, and then everyone grows up, and the young one gets kids. Pretty easy. It continues over the time. See, we don't have an expanding what do you call it? Child group. Yes. I talked to Ola with these factual terms, child group. Yes. So you can see how they are expanding over time, right? So the population is growing, even though we don't have more kids at the bottom. And then, here, we will also have an aging population in some sense. So this is approximately what the UN is expecting into the future will happen with the population, how we will fill up the floors, basically. So, what we need then, basically, we need the facts and frameworks, but we also need to handle our brains' stupid ways of over-dramatizing the world around us. So we created 10 rules of thumb that we think can be helpful, and I'm going to walk through them extremely fast. The first dramatic instinct that we talk about is the gap instinct. We tend to think about conflict and huge differences, but when we hear stories having those ingredients, like poor and rich and so on, we should remember to locate the majority, because that one is seldom mentioned. So just by remembering that, we can probably get a better worldview. We tend to hear a lot of stories saying it's just getting worse. But when we hear stories like that, we should remember, would an improvement get publicity? Most likely not. We never see news like this. Yesterday, all trains were on time again, right? And when we see a line, we should remember that even though our brains fill it in like this, many lines bend. You have so many different shapes of trends and lines and, charts. And just remembering that it will not automatically continue straight. Then we have the fear instinct. A lot of stories around us are around fear. Help, help. But we need to calculate the risks. And then we have the size instinct. We tend to hear it's a huge problem. And we very often hear about one single number. But we need to remember to compare and divide always. Otherwise, it's useless information. This one came from the UNICEF. In 2016, 4,489,000 infants died. It's a horrible number. But 2015, it was worse. 1950, much worse. So the 2016 number is bad, but it's much better than it used to be. We need to have these two thoughts in our brains at the same time. Then we have the generalization instinct, that we tend to group people and things and situations pretty roughly. But we should, of course, be careful with that. Here we can see a boat with immigrants coming over the ocean, trying to get to the Europe coastline. I saw an article in a Spanish newspaper that I really liked, because when we see this image, it's very easy for us to group these immigrants as being all the same. But this image I really like. one of the boats accidentally turned up on a nudist beach at Gran Canaria. And I'm just wondering how these immigrants were grouping the Europeans, because the Europeans they saw were pink and nude. So I think that would be very interesting to hear their story. Would they have crossed the ocean if they knew where they were what they were going to meet? And then we have the destiny instinct. It will always be like this. We tend to think that everything, cultures, people, and so on, are very static. But it's a slow movement most of the time. Things are moving, but we don't see it. We tend to be very single-minded. And of course, it's better to have a toolbox. We tend to blame, but as soon as we start blaming, we stop thinking. So it's very important that we remind ourselves that there might be other explanations and more systematic ones. And then maybe the worst one, that we tend to think that things are urgent and we have to act now or never. But as soon as we get that feeling, I think we should try to breathe and relax until we do anything, because otherwise it's a risk we do the wrong things. We should take one step at a time. So these are the rules of thumb, the chapters of the book. So when we talk about the media, people are usually saying that the media is lying and so on. I don't think so. A lot of the time they're doing a pretty good job, but our brains have a hard time handling all the exceptions that we see. We never see the everyday life. So we need schools to actually teach a worldview that is consistent and understandable. And we need to teach the students not only being critical to sources, which we're pretty good at nowadays, but we also need to be critical against our own ways of thinking, because that is actually one of the problems that takes us wrong. So when we see the news like this, maybe we should do as with the cigarettes, adding a warning so that, and a helpline, so that we actually can get help to stay calm and relaxed and fact-based. If you do the test you just did here, and you want a diploma like this, you can do the same test on our website. And if you score 100% correct, no worries, you can do it several times, and we will only capture when you succeed. When you get all correct answers, you will get your own diploma that you can print. So just so you know. And we have already been to the news, we have been to schools, and also Norrskenshouse is actually using this test when they are hiring to make sure that the new staff they are hiring are not more stupid than chimps. And I think that is a pretty decent baseline. So if you want to know more, you can go here, and you can follow us here. And the screen here is black, so I would guess I'm actually almost on time. Thank you.
Anna Rosling.